All right, you ready to do this? We're running out of time here. I know you got a hard stop.
Nah, I could go over. Like,
Okay. Welcome to the Disney Hack Podcast, where we're talking all things tricks and tips for your Disney trips. I'm here today with my good friend Mark Lucas, who just returned from a trip down to the Magic Kingdom right before Hurricane Irma blew through, and he took an unusual, spontaneous trip to Disney World just because, well, he can. And so he flew down on a Wednesday and flew back home on a Thursday and squeezed in as much as he possibly can. If you listen to his last trip report, you know he's a guy who can squeeze a lot into a day at Walt Disney World. Welcome back to the Disney Hack, Mark.
hey, Joey, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, man. So you decided to go down for a quick 2-day trip during Food and Wine, and tell me kind of where this came from and why you did it.
Well, it started this summer. I had jokingly said to my wife, I just want to fly down for a short trip, and like once Food and Wine comes out, and I want to try some of the new things they have coming out. Plus, I want to see Main Street all decorated for fall. I think Main Street is in its fall decorations is probably the best set of decorations they have between all the autumn colors with the bunting and the leaves and the pumpkins. So I just wanted to go down and get some pictures of that and just kind of take in the autumn atmosphere, even though down in Florida still it's not autumn weather yet.
Yeah, technically it's still summertime, but yeah, I can see what you mean, especially with the low park attendance. Did that have something to do to factor into your trip as well?
Well, I think it did in an inadvertent way. It caused the airfare to be low. I was able to get both my flights for $22. So each direction was only a $22 flight on Spirit. And then I was actually able to get a annual pass rate at All Star Music for $75 a night. So even with taxes, it only totaled $83.
Wow, that's incredible. So you and your wife, correct?
No, actually, I went down by myself. It was a solo trip.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know. I thought you took her with you. So you paid about $50 for airfare and about 85-ish for your room night. And of course, you spent a little bit of money on food. We'll talk about that in a minute, but that is incredible. And the fact that you're an annual pass holder means you didn't pay to get into the parks those 2 days.
Yeah, it worked out really well. All in, even with the rental car, I was out for less than $300. So for a couple days at Disney World, it was definitely a reasonable trip compared to what a lot of Disney World trips cost.
Outstanding. Wow, that's great. And knowing that the room, had your wife gone, would have been, the same regardless, because it would have just been the two of you in there. So that's kind of nice. The same with the rental car. And since she has an annual pass, the only thing you'd be paying extra for is the flight and some food. So that's really great.
Yeah, I was actually trying to convince her because I left on Wednesday. Monday was Labor Day, and she had worked. She works in the hospital, and she'd ended up working about a 16-hour day because of some situations. And I was trying to convince her that she could take Wednesday and Thursday off and come with me. And she was tempted, but she had some stuff going on that she didn't want to miss, so she decided not to. But I almost think if it was any other week, she definitely would have considered it because we have my wife's mother that lives relatively close to us that could have taken care of my son. And after talking to her about it, like, we're definitely going to look at coming back, probably not this week because of the holiday, but probably next week. It actually is kind of a weird situation. The airport I fly out of, Latrobe, is actually shutting down on Tuesday for, I believe, 12 days because they're going to pave the runway. So, like, there's no flights in and out of Latrobe. So that was part of why it was either do it this week or wait till the end of the month. And by the end of the month, we have a trip planned for the middle of October, so it would seem like it's right up against that. But I think next year we're definitely looking forward to a short trip this time of year because of the crowd levels, and hopefully we can get the same kind of deals because of everybody going back to school.
Yeah, and hopefully the weather will stay off next year, give everybody a break.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of stress, like looking into the forward projection. And down there was a little bit of an eeriness because you could tell people were uncertain because of what Irma's track was going to be and how it was going to affect their trips. And there was kind of that buzz going over the parks. Plus, on Thursday, and I'll post some pictures of this, they actually had started taking down the scrims that they put over construction sites. So, for example, where the Sounds Dangerous stage was over beside Midway Mania, that has been scrimmed while they're tearing that building down, but the scrims were down when I was on Thursday when I was there. So I was actually able to get a picture of the scaffolding with the remnants of that building exposed, which is something you never see at Disney World.
Yeah, interesting. Well, it's smart that they would do that. They know how to handle themselves in a bad weather situation like this. But let's get to your trip report. I'm excited to hear about all the things that you did. You sent me a few pictures while you were on your trip, and I don't have any notes. I just want to know where you went and what you did and what you saw. So why don't you go ahead and start at the beginning, and if I got any questions, I'll stop and ask you.
Okay, so on Wednesday, my flight landed right around 9 o'clock. Like I said, I had a rental car, so got off the flight, took the little self-contained train over to the terminal, just zipped right down to the rental car garage, picked out my car, and off to Disney World I went. About half an hour later, I was in the parking lot of Animal Kingdom. So went to Animal Kingdom, and when I first got there, the lines actually looked pretty substantial getting into the park. It was about 10:30. I don't know if there was a rush right at that point or what, but the lines actually looked pretty substantial. So I was a little nervous because I was hearing about how low the crowds would be. Once I got into the park, it definitely spread out, and there definitely seemed like there wasn't as many people there as the lines at the turns or the tap styles would have indicated. I went into Pandora, got some pictures of Pandora, walked around, looked at what was going on there. The line was over 3 hours, even as low as the crowds was for Flight of Passage. So once I got my pictures, headed out of there, and just proceeded to walk through Africa, through Asia, down along the Discovery Island Trail, along the back of the Tree of Life, through Dinoland. And all I did at Animal Kingdom was I just took pictures. I'm a firm believer that Animal Kingdom is the most beautiful and well-themed of the parks, and it's just a photographer's paradise as far as taking pictures, and I got some wonderful ones on this trip. And I just really wasn't motivated to ride any of the attractions, so I was in the park a little over an hour, just walking through and getting pictures, and then I headed out.
Wow, that's amazing. So you just did a circle tour of Animal Kingdom, getting pictures in that sort of just at the very tail end of magic hour there where you get the best light. And I actually saw a picture that I don't know if you took it this week, but it's Everest in the background with the water and the bridges in the foreground, and your pictures always look really great. So I'm excited to see what you got from this trip of Animal Kingdom. Was that your only time you spent at Animal Kingdom?
That was the only time I spent at Animal Kingdom these 2 days, and that picture that I posted yesterday was from this trip, and I really thought that picture kind of summarized Animal Kingdom, and it was almost otherworldly, where you had the lushness of the forest with the river and that bridge that looks so in place in Asia than with Everest in the background. But yeah, that was one of the pictures from this trip, and that was why I wanted to go, just to get those type of pictures. And it was nice because it was just me. I didn't have to compromise on what we were going to do. I just walked through and, I want to stop and take a picture. So I think I took a little over 200 pictures just in Animal Kingdom, and it was just elements of theming. It was a lot of the elements around Harambe and around Anandapur that were just the things that I love so much about Animal Kingdoms that makes it look like it's in place where it is themed. So it was just a great opportunity to get some really great pictures.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see your pictures of Harambe and in Pandora. This picture, I'm looking at it right now. If you didn't know that was taken in Florida, you would think that was taken somewhere in Central Asia. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with that picture, and I have a couple in Harambe that I think are as good. And if you look at my black and white account, I know it's a bridge coming out of Pandora, but it's transitioning into Asia, and it's the same thing. You wouldn't necessarily think it's at Disney World, but it has that otherworldly quality about it.
Yeah, it really does. It's pretty striking. Awesome. So what did you do next?
So hopped in the car and drove over to Epcot. While I was in Animal Kingdom, like I said, I wasn't really inspired to ride any of the attractions while I was in Animal Kingdom, but I did want to hit a couple of them in Epcot. So I was able to get a Spaceship Earth for about the time I'd be arriving, and a Soarin' for the next hour window after that. Epcot wasn't crowded at all. I was actually in row 8 of the Amaze lot, so I was able to actually walk to Epcot. I ended up taking the tram just because it was sitting right there, and I figured I'd be doing enough walking throughout the day. But even getting there at between 11:30 and 12, I was still on the front side of that canal that runs through the parking lot. So I think that was kind of indicative of how the crowd was for Epcot that day. I did Spaceship Earth, and while I was in Spaceship Earth, it just started to pour. So fortunately, I had my raincoat with me, came out of Spaceship Earth, tucked my raincoat, put my raincoat on, tucked my camera under my raincoat, and started over to the land pavilion and escaped the rain in the land pavilion. And it was a good, solid, heavy Florida rain. And once I was in the land pavilion, I got a couple pictures in the land pavilion, but mostly I was there just to ride Soarin'. Once I got in line for Soarin', I knew I needed to get that second Fast Pass, though, out of the B side, so I could start to get my fourth Fast Pass from anything I wanted. So I went ahead and grabbed a Living with the Land. So I rode Soarin', rode Living with the Land, got some pictures with Living in the Land, and then headed out. By then, the rain had stopped, and I perceived it to be more clear. But like looking at the pictures I took from the time I left the land pavilion to the time I went over to Mission Space, I had taken some pictures and it was very overcast. But it's funny how the perception of what you're experiencing is totally different than reality of what it was.
That's one of the beautiful things about photography, is that it's very honest.
So I was on the side of Future World where the land pavilion and the imagination pavilion are, and Food and Wine has some new booths set up over there, and they're a little bit more inspired type booths. You have Coastal Eats, you have Active Eats, and then down along the path you have the cheese pairing shop, you have the chocolate shop, and you have the Caribbean booth. So I decided to head down that way. I got the Scampi dip at Coastal Eats, and it was outstanding. It was a fantastic dish. It was really well done. Really enjoyed it. Headed down to the cheese, and I got the beef dish there. It was a beef Wellington served over egg noodles. It was almost like a Spetzel noodle, also really well done, well seasoned. I thought to myself, though, I find it interesting that you're doing all these heavy foods when the weather right now wasn't conducive. It was a 90-degree day, and because of the rain, it was quite humid.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, you would think that Florida in September would be, and especially with a little bit of raining, it tends to bring in the humidity. So walking around in that could be pretty uncomfortable. But it looks like you had used an app. You'd sent me a picture of a screenshot with some of your course that you took through the park, and it uses different colors to indicate when you're moving quickly and when you're moving slowly. It looks like you took a nice leisurely stroll through World Showcase.
Yeah, so on my phone, I have the Samsung My Fit app, and I also downloaded the Under Armour Map My Run app. I'd actually seen somebody who had done this on Facebook, and it looked like a lot of fun, where they just turned on their fitness tracker that had a GPS quality about it that would track your workout. So I turned it on, and that way I could see where I went. After I ate those two dishes, like I circled around the World Showcase, went up and did the new Mission Space, experienced the new green attraction, and I've heard it described as soaring over Earth, and I would say that's a pretty accurate description. I've never done orange. My wife doesn't want me to try orange because of the intensity of it. I mean, a ride kills a few people and it gets a bad reputation. You know how it is.
Yeah.
I did the green, and I enjoyed the green. I think that Mission Space sometimes gets a bad rap for the fact that it had a bad reputation, but as far as immersiveness, you get put in that capsule, and the capsule is tight, but you do have all the switches you can play with, and the new video is really well done. So I enjoyed that, but I did send you a picture, and I was with one other person who was traveling by himself, and we had the whole pre-show room to ourselves. So they ran the whole ride for two of us sitting in one capsule. So I found that to be amusing.
I had seen that picture you sent, and it, didn't have anybody else in the shot, and but it didn't show the line behind you. So clearly, if they're just going to let two of you ride in one capsule for the entire show, there wasn't anybody else around to even let in.
Yeah, like definitely it was running low. That the whole park was low that day, and you could tell when Epcot's not crowded, it's one of the parks where you could really feel it. After that, I headed off to the World Showcase and continued around, and You could actually see where I'd done 3 Caballeros. You saw the path on the fitness tracker, which was kind of fun. I then went into Norway, and I was able to get a fast pass for Frozen Ever After from the time that I left Mission Space to the time I got there, and it was pretty much just a right dead fast pass. And it was showing about a 45-minute wait. And once again, it was fun because I got to ride Frozen Ever After, and on my GPS track, you could actually see the path I took inside the building. I continued around World Showcase and stopped at Germany for the Germany booth. Now, I am a big German food fan. Like, I live in a part of the country where we have some great German restaurants. My wife and my date night restaurant is actually a German restaurant, so I'm used to really good German food. And we actually had a discussion about, I didn't think the food at the Germany booth was as good as some of the other places, but then we kind of came to the conclusion that I live in a place where there is really good German food, so I almost know exactly what to expect. So maybe that's why it was a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah, that makes sense, which would be surprising considering the number of German natives that work at the German pavilion. But then again, they're only able to work with what they have, and they're working out of Central Florida, not someplace like Pennsylvania, where there's also a lot of German natives who know what good German food tastes like.
And maybe actually their German food's more authentic to what German food should be, but the German food we have here, I think, tastes just a little bit better. It's seasoned with a little bit heavier of a hand. And that was the only observation. I felt like the noodle gratin was a little bit flat, and the bratwurst didn't have as much flavor as sometimes I'm used to. So then, between Germany and Italy is the Spain booth, and the big running joke going in was how much I was looking forward to trying the paella. So the paella was really well done. It was a good meal. The only thing I hadn't really thought about is because it's a rice-based dish, it is messy. So I'm trying to eat it, and it was drizzling, so I actually had my raincoat on, and I had rice on my raincoat at several points because it had fallen off my plate. And
the ready-made bib.
The tables around there, you could see that. Yeah, fortunately, I did have I had my raincoat on, so I wasn't getting my Thank the Phoenicians shirt all stained up. But you could also see around the table there was rice all over the ground, so I wasn't the only one having that issue. I will say, though, that the shrimp that they put on the paella was probably the single best component of any meal I had at Food and Wine. So it was definitely worth getting. Like I said, it was just a lot more messy than you would anticipate it being, but that does make sense looking back on it being a rice-based dish.
Yeah, you had joked about you and your wife saying that you just wanted to spend $100 on some paella because of the trip down there. In essence, it was less than $300, so that's not so bad.
Yeah, and I got some other bonuses out of it. Continued around, stopped at the American Pavilion at the booth where they have the lobster roll. And I've heard mixed things about the lobster roll in years past, and I'll be honest with you, I have had a bad experience with the lobster roll at Columbia Harbor House, so I was a little bit nervous. But I went ahead and got the lobster roll, and I will say it was amazing. Like, the bun was toasted. They put a sauce underneath that worked really well. And I was nervous because when she was preparing it, she took the bun out, put the sauce on it, and then took an ice cream scoop and went into a tray and brought out a scoop of the lobster. I was like, oh, this is going to end poorly. And then she put a butter sauce on top. Having it, though, it was really good. It was what I think a lobster roll should taste like, as opposed to what I'd experienced in the past at Columbia Harbor House. So I was really pleased with that. I actually think that was high up as one of my favorite meals of the day, that lobster roll at Hops and Barley.
Nice. Wow. Yeah, you're really eating your way around the world. That's pretty awesome. So the paella you had that was at the Spanish booth. You went to Germany. You ate in the Caribbean. You ate in at the American Pavilion and the American Adventure. Wow. Okay. I'm getting hungry just listening to you.
So went to France, and then they have a croissant there with escargot in it. And it was almost disappointing. It almost feels like at this point they're just trying to figure out a vessel to put the escargot in so they can say they have an escargot-based dish. It wasn't full of that garlicky, buttery, snaily goodness that you really expect if you like escargot. And like I think almost at this point it's just like let's just find a vessel to put the escargot in so we can say we have escargot. So after that, I was heading back, and at this point I was done with the concept of food. And heading past Ireland, though, I caught a glimpse of the chocolate pudding cake dessert, and it looked really good. So I figured I could deal with something sweet, and it was amazing. It was a chocolate pudding cake, basically. It was really well done. It wasn't super sweet. It almost had a decadent quality about it, but it was covered with a vanilla sauce that had the sweetness, and it evened it out nicely. It was really good. I definitely recommend somebody looking for dessert taking advantage of that at the Ireland Pavilion.
What a great way to put a cap on your dining around the world with some dessert in Ireland.
Yes. I had a little bit of time before I wanted to head out. It was about 4-ish at this point. So I went ahead back into Future World, and I rode Figment. I went into the Chase Visa character spot, and I'd say anybody that has a Chase Visa, take advantage of this. It's a great opportunity to meet a couple of characters and not have to wait in line. I know the character spot at the time I went in was 45 minutes, whereas the Chase Visa one, I walked in and met with Mickey and Goofy, and it was a 10-minute experience.
So you're going to have a new profile picture now with your new buddies, Mickey and Goofy, huh?
Yeah, definitely. I was able to get another Fast Pass for Soarin', so I went back into Land Pavilion, rode Soarin' one last time, and then I headed out at Epcot and headed for my resort.
So did the app actually track how many miles?
It did track the miles. The only thing I'd point out is it also tracked the time I spent on attractions. So it probably gave a little bit more of it obviously put a bit of a pad on that. But it said I walked a little over 3 miles. But it was more fun just to look at it afterwards. And you jokingly had said to me, well, I can tell you rode Soarin', I can tell you rode Frozen, just by the path I took. And it was just kind of fun to look at that and see the different path you took throughout the day.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Soarin' is that long hallway that you walk down to get to the attraction. It just shows this kind of dogleg where you're going off. It seems like you're almost walking out of Epcot just to get down to where you actually ride Soarin', the attraction, and then you turn around and come right back up the same hallway, it seems like.
Yeah, and I was in a new theater, and it seems like it's a good ways back. I don't know if the hallway is any longer than it is with the two older theaters, but it's really evident how far you walk because you're walking, it almost appears out of the pavilion. And then, like, you see a little bit of walking in the actual theater and then pretty much walk back a hallway parallel to that hallway. Like, you don't realize how far that theater is from the actual Land Pavilion until you look at it in that context.
What did you do after your second ride on Soarin'?
So decided it was time to head out. So headed back, walked out to the car, and went and headed off to my resort. So the interesting thing, I was really thirsty at this point. The food and wine, they have bottles of water, they have the beer and wine and the mixed drink selections. They don't have soda, and there's the availability of the fountain water, but you have to go into like Tangerine Cafe or one of the quick services that have a fountain to get the bottled water, the fountain water. So I ended up stopping at the Speedway, and this was kind of eerie. I don't know if it was because it was about 6 o'clock at this point, and it's always really busy, but there was a lot of construction workers there, and a Disney flatbed full of plywood and like corrugated panels pulled up. So you could definitely tell there was stuff going on with hurricane prep at that point. So I got myself a bucket of soda to help kind of get over the fact that I ate too much and didn't drink enough, and headed off to All-Star Music.
What did you do when you got there?
So I arrived, I've never stayed at All-Stars before, and I'd actually never even been at the All-Stars. And I was looking forward almost to seeing it because I'd been genuinely surprised about how good of an experience I had in July staying at Pop. And you hear a lot of negatives about the All-Stars. I'll say a lot of my initial impressions about the All-Stars were not accurate at all. It is a lot of buildings, but the way the buildings are configured in relation to the parking lots, it's very easy to walk. Looking at the map, the one thing I said to myself is I didn't want to get in the country fair section of All-Star Music. However, I didn't do a room request or I didn't do the touring plans fact. So I just took a chance on whatever room they gave me. And I ended up with a room in Building 6 of the country fair section, which is clear back in the back. Now, for those of you who've never done the All-Stars, they're actually a lot closer together than I thought. I actually pictured they were a good bit apart and they were their own separate resorts. In reality, there are 3 resorts that are basically one up against each other, more or less, and with a relatively large parking lot between them.
Now, do they have bus pickups? I know that you had a rental car, but do they have bus pickups at each one of the different All-Stars, or do you have to walk a long distance to get to maybe public transportation at Disney? And how did it compare to having a parking lot right next to where you were staying?
They did have bus pickups. Each building has its own lobby, its own quick service restaurant, and they each have a bus pickup there. So from where I was at, it was a relatively long walk. I would say probably 10 minutes to the lobby for somebody who would be back in that section. But I was in one of the furthest rooms from the lobby. If you were relying on Disney transportation, I would definitely do a room request. And if you were in a standard room, which I was, I would try to get either in Broadway or Rock and Roll as opposed to the country fair section because it's just a little bit further back.
That's good to know. So what did you do after you got to the room? You didn't stay there, did you?
No, I just basically took some pictures of the room. Like I'd said, never experienced the All-Stars before. And it was a hot day. It was a humid day. So I actually decided to take a swim. And it was funny because going down, I said I was going to take my swimming stuff, but I didn't think I was going to use it. And then at one point I said I wasn't even going to take it. And at the last minute I decided just to throw it in. And that way I had it. I'm really glad I did. It was a really refreshing swim on a humid day. And the pool is back in that section is a really fun concept. It actually is shaped like a grand piano. And it even has a tile mosaic that looks like the piano keys. And then for the laundromat building, it's actually a component from the old style component stereos that we had when we were kids with the giant knobs. I'm sure you remember that. So anybody in my age group is probably going to remember the giant stack stereos that seems like everybody had with the giant speakers. So it was like one component of that part was the theming of the laundromat building for that pool. So it was kind of a fun nod. The one thing I was really impressed with, and this was one of the places where I had expectations about the All-Stars that were totally off base. The horticulture at the All-Star resorts was really well done. It was very lush. It was very green. There were a lot of trees. There were a lot of shrubs. Honestly, in my mind, I just pictured because you see the pictures of the All-Stars where you're between the buildings and it's relatively wide open and there's not a lot going on as far as plant life. I kind of pictured that's what the whole thing was like. But once you got out of those center areas, you got into these pathways and they were every bit as green and every bit as decorated with the beauty of the shrubs and the beauty of the trees that you'd expect at a moderate resort. And I really appreciated that. It was a lot nicer in that regard than I ever pictured it would be.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't been to the All-Stars either, and it's probably one of the places we would most likely stay.
Yeah, and I would definitely do that.
Yeah, we'll probably stay at a value, and then for our split, we'll go to. I really want to stay at the Poly, and I really want to stay at the Boardwalk, and I don't want to wait a long time to do that. I want to do them on one of our next trips. So we'll probably do All-Stars, and then we'll probably go over to the Boardwalk to finish out our trip.
Yeah, the Boardwalk's a wonderful resort. I did that in my June trip. We had basically one night where we had to cover after being at Saratoga Springs, and we got a great rate for what a Boardwalk room costs. But it was really nice to have that amazing pool at our disposal. Towards the end of a trip, I could definitely see a lot of merit in going to the Boardwalk because you have access to that wonderful pool.
So tell me what you did next, because I know from experience that you're not done until the day is over.
No, I wasn't done. So I decided I'd seen some videos, and anybody that follows my Instagram knows I have probably at this point about 2,000 pictures of happily ever after. And I always seem to end up in the same spot about 20 feet behind the partner statue, which is a great perspective. You get a great view of the fireworks, plus you can see all the projections, and it's a really immersive experience being there. I decided I wanted to do something a little bit different, so I ended up parking at the TTC and then walking to the Polynesian. And it's actually not a far walk. Instead of going through security at the TTC, you just keep going straight to the end of where the old monorail drop-off was. And there's a path that takes you right over to the Poly, and it's probably only about 200 feet long. And you're right there at the Poly at that point. So I then proceeded to just walk around the Poly, got some pictures, went in the Great Ceremonial House, took a picture of the Tiki God, and then I headed for the beach. So I first went to the beach that was further down by where they do the luau show, and it was a really good spot. There was nobody else there. I had a good view of the castle, and I thought was going to be a good view of the fireworks, but I realized that they probably weren't going to pipe the music in, and I might not be able to hear it because it was going to be drowned out by the dinner show that was going on. So I then looked at the map and thought that there was a spot that would be conducive to seeing it between the dock and the bungalows. So I walked over there around the pool at the Poly, and sure enough, there was a spot where you had a good view of the castle. You could actually see the train station, and you were far enough over to the left where the bungalows weren't interfering, and it was a great view to see the fireworks. The only issue I saw with that is a lot of people that are staying at the Poly or had a reservation at Ohana or for whatever reason find themselves there, go to that spot, and because you're kind of sandwiched in an area where you can see the castle because there's an island that blocks it to the left and then the bungalows are to the right, all these people are squeezed into probably about 100 foot of beach. So it's a little bit crowded, but it's nowhere near what you'd experience on Main Street. So they do pipe the music in for Happily Ever After. You can't make out the projections from that distance. You can see the castle changing colors, but you can't see what's going on. But the fireworks appear so much higher in the sky than they do from watching it in Magic Kingdom. So if you want to experience it as a fireworks show more than just a projection show and a fireworks show, I definitely recommend considering doing it at the Poly. The other thing is, for our October trip, we're actually arriving about 9 o'clock on a night of the Halloween party, and we've already talked about it. They shoot off Hallowishes at 10:15, and as long as we don't run into any delays, our intention is to go to the Poly that evening and watch Hallowishes from that same spot on the beach, because we're not going to pay for the party ticket, and then go to Trader Sam's for a drink. And that's how we'll start our trip in October. So if you're looking to not burn a park ticket or you arrive later in the evening, it's definitely something I'd consider to just see the fireworks.
That sounds great. That sounds like a really nice way to maybe end a date or maybe even start a date. Date night there. Instead of going into the parks, go to the Poly where you can watch the fireworks from the beach, and then, like you said, go into Trader Sam's and enjoy the nightlife there. That's pretty awesome. And what a great way to start your trip as well. If you're flying in the evening, it's instead of burning a ticket for the park that day, especially if you don't have an annual pass. You guys are a bit different in that you do, but if I were going out there without an annual pass, it'd be a nice way to kind of begin my Disney trip by going out to the Poly and having that experience on the beach, seeing the fireworks, and then having a nice dinner or cocktails. That's great.
So after that, I was right by the boat dock. I originally had planned on walking back through the Great Ceremonial House and taking the monorail to the Magic Kingdom because there were magic hours that night. I, however, decided I was so close to the boat dock, I ended up taking the boat across. And it was a nice, enjoyable boat ride. I always enjoy those little boats that run from the Grand Floridian, the Poly, and the one runs from the Wilderness Lodge. It's just a nice way. You're right up against the lake, and it was a nice, cool evening, and I enjoyed that trip over to the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, I always like shaking up my transportation options. So you left the car, you took I guess you'd have to leave the car. You took the boat over to Magic Kingdom.
So I went into Magic Kingdom, took advantage of the fact that it was a little bit lower of crowds because it was magic hours. A lot of people were leaving. And as I was walking down Main Street, I took a lot of pictures. I got pictures of the scarecrows that were set up there in Main Street. And I got the pictures of the buildings all lit up at night with the pumpkins all lit up along the top. it was just a great chance to really get some great photos. Like I've said, the Main Street looks absolutely amazing this time of year. I actually think I like Main Street in the autumn more than I even like it at Christmas. It's just so well done for autumn. I walked up Main Street, got some pictures in the hub, and then headed into Tomorrowland and got some pictures. I was actually hoping to ride the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, but it wasn't running. I don't know if they shut it down for all magic hours, if it was just for that night. So I walked through Tomorrowland, got some pictures, and then headed back into the hub. And keep in mind, all this is being tracked, so you could have actually followed along what I was doing by looking at the map. The cool thing was, at that time of the evening, they actually had the castle open. So I was able to go up the ramp and get some really neat pictures of the castle lit up from the base. So they're kind of from a little bit different angle, and then looking up at the lit up castle. Plus, I was able to walk through. And as many people know that frequent Disney, they do open up the castle, but it's definitely not as often as it used to be, as I remember from the trip when I was young. It's a rare occasion to be able to walk through the castle. I walked into Fantasyland and got some pictures of the various things. I had thought about riding Peter Pan, but it's had about a 45-minute wait. I decided not to do that. So I ducked down there past the Rapunzel bathrooms, and they were doing that, the magic shot where you do the lantern. So they do that during magic hours for anybody that's interested. And I decided to ride the Haunted Mansion because there's nothing better than riding the Haunted Mansion at night. Haunted Mansion was one of the rides where it was fun because the tracker actually tracked me as I was going through the Haunted Mansion. You could see the path my Doom Buggy took. So that was a fun twist that really kind of played out well on that app. That, looking back on it, it was a neat way to remember, oh yeah, I rode the Haunted Mansion here.
Yeah, because the squiggly lines all over in that one area. Same thing.
Yep.
Same thing with Big Thunder in Space Mountain. It looks like you could see the lines wiggling all over out there. I want to ask you real quick before you move on. I have two images of what looked like the same track. Was that because you were running both of the apps simultaneously to see what the similarities and differences would be?
So, like I said, I actually had used two apps. I'd used My Fitness app, which was the stock Samsung app that does it, and that was actually the blue lines. The one thing about that is it shows you if you're moving faster, so you end up with a light blue line or a darker blue line. I like that app as far as the interface a little bit better, but as far as the map itself goes, the Under Armour Map My Run app, which was the one with the red line, gave you a lot better of a map, I thought, because it was one solid color and you didn't have to distinguish what the different colors meant. But I didn't like the interface quite as well. So what I would say is it didn't burn that much battery. You actually kind of jokingly said to me about how much battery is burning. So I went into my settings and looked, and I was actually burning less than 1% an hour running both those apps that whole time I was doing it. So it had a minimal impact on my battery just running those apps.
Yeah, that's great. A couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, I did this very same thing at the SeaWorld in San Antonio, Texas. And by 11 a.m., I think I started it at about 9:30 when we got to the park, and by 11 a.m., my phone was dead. So I get the difference between an iPhone and a Samsung, I guess, because I've never done that again since, because I wanted to make sure that I maximized my power in the park. But how cool that you could do that, because it is a lot of fun to see where you went. Now, you said the Samsung is the one in blue?
Yes, the Samsung proprietary app is the one in blue. The Under Armour one is the one in red.
What I like about this one is it actually shows your mile markers on there, so you can kind of, it's like connect the dots. You can kind of see, where you went. If, somebody like myself, I know what route you took, as opposed to looking at the red one that doesn't. You could have gone in either direction. But I like it. It's a really great tool.
I don't know. I more looked at it as just a kind of a fun way to keep track of what you did. I honestly wish, looking back on it, we always joke about that first trip we took to Disney World like 4 years ago, and all the mistakes we made. And it was still during Legacy Fast Pass, and we joke about the day we were at Animal Kingdom, where we got a Fast Pass for the safari, and then we walked to Dinosaur and rode Dinosaur, then walked back and rode the safari, then went and got a Fast Pass for Everest, and then went and watched The Lion King back when it was down at Camp Mini Mickey. Oh my gosh, I would have loved to have had this app going back then, because you know how many times we traversed that park that day? Like, it was an exhausting day, but looking back on it, no sane person that knows Disney would ever park tour the way we did that day. But we just did because we didn't know any better.
I would love to get a group of people who really know how to navigate the parks well and track their GPS. If you're out there listening to this and you have some of these apps and you track your trips through Disney, please send them to me so I want to create a list so that we could share that with folks and say, here's a great way to tour the park that has actually been done. And Mark, with your permission, I'd love to share this as well so that people know what somebody who knows how to navigate the park will do when given an opportunity to do a single trip through Magic Kingdom or Epcot.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't even think about using the app until partway through Epcot, so it didn't start until around the Mexico Pavilion. But yeah, you're more than welcome to share them, and I had a great time doing them. And I'd encourage anybody, like I said, if you just want a kind of a fun way to look back on how you toured the park, I would definitely take that as an opportunity because it's fun to look at. Plus, it's kind of fun to see the way the rides affect it also. So after I did Haunted Mansion, I decided I was going to head down and ride Pirates. And Pirates, that time of night, was a walk-on. Unfortunately, the building for Pirates isn't conducive to the GPS signal, so all you see is my line stop, and then it moves over about 50 feet and starts again. So unfortunately, the little trick where you see yourself on the ride vehicle doesn't work at Pirates because I did it twice and neither time did it pick up.
And you're packing a lot into this extra magic hour.
Yeah, definitely. Because keep in mind, I had watched the park had closed at 9, so magic hours only went till 11, and I was at the beach of the Poly until 9:20 when Happily Ever After ended. So it was a productive trip, and I really felt like I got a lot out of magic hours. After Pirates, I headed out, and it was actually only about 20 till 11. I didn't even make it till actual magic hour closed. I was out of the park well before 11. I actually think I was at my car in the TTC at 11 o'clock.
So that's kind of an early night for you.
It is, but I was up early that day, and I knew I was going to try to get up early the next day.
Yeah.
And
so just to recap day one really quick, you woke up in Pennsylvania, you got on a plane. By 9 something, you're at the Animal Kingdom. And you get your rental car at the airport, you're at Animal Kingdom, you spend an hour there, you walk all of Animal Kingdom taking pictures, then you drive over to Epcot, you walk all of Epcot riding multiple rides, eating lots of food. Then you go to your hotel, you take a swim, you go over to the Poly, you watch the fireworks show, you enjoy the sights and sounds of the Poly, take some more pictures, you take a boat over to Magic Kingdom, you ride half a dozen attractions and experience some opportunities to take pictures without any crowds, and you're back in your car by 11 heading back to your resort. That's an incredible day.
yeah, it was a fun day. And I would say anybody that's a big Disney fan that thinks they want to try a solo trip but isn't sure about it, I would highly recommend it. One, you're doing exactly what you want to do. Like I said, I didn't really have any great desire to ride anything at Animal Kingdom, so I didn't. And I ended up taking in the Pixar and Disney Festival short films at Epcot. It's something we'd never done before because it wasn't something that as a group we wanted to do. I had a little bit of downtime, and I decided that was something I wanted to try.
Okay, so you get to bed what, about midnight?
It was about 12:30.
Okay. And how early did you get up the next day?
I got up about 7. So I didn't have that many clothes. I just threw everything in my bag, grabbed a quick shower, and I was on my way to the park. And about 7:45. I was running a little bit behind where I wanted to be, but I was still there and plenty of time to get there before the park opened.
Wow.
So got there, like I said, I got there a little bit after 8. The one thing I thought was surprising, I always thought of the All-Stars and Animal Kingdom Lodge being very far out. And now that I know the roads at Disney real well, I actually don't find them to be that far out of the way. The interesting thing is, everybody talks about the Animal Kingdom Lodge and how far it is away from everything. It's actually not real well known, but the Animal Kingdom Lodge is actually closer to all the parks with the exception of Magic Kingdom than the Wilderness Lodge is. And I always thought that was kind of an interesting fact that Animal Kingdom Lodge is actually closer to Epcot, to Studios, and obviously to Animal Kingdom than the Wilderness Lodge is. And it kind of puts into perspective, as far spread out as the parks are, they are still relatively close together. And once you get to know the layout of the roads and so forth in Disney World, you actually get pretty good at getting from point A to point B relatively efficiently.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I'm pulling up the My Disney Experience app now, and you're absolutely right. Magic Kingdom is so far away from everything else that it makes sense that the others would be so much closer to the other three parks.
Yeah. So got to the Magic Kingdom. I was actually parked 3 rows back from the first row they were parking that wasn't premium parking. They weren't even running the tram at that point, so I was able to walk to the TTC, and I took the ferry boat across because I love taking the ferry boat in the morning. Just the mist over the Magic Kingdom, and it's just a nice gradual way to approach. So I always appreciate the ferry boat. It almost builds that anticipation as you're going across, seeing everything get bigger and bigger as you approach. Got in about 8:30, and it wasn't crowded at all. Walked up Main Street, got a lot of great pictures on Main Street. Once again, the autumn decorations are absolutely stunning. Went up and took some pictures around the hub, and then I headed into Tomorrowland to get some pictures of Tomorrowland in the morning. Circled back through, and once again, since it was early in the morning, at this point, they had opened up the park, and the castle walkway was open. So I was able to go and get the same type of photos right up against the castle, looking up at the castle, kind of a different perspective on the castle, but this time, obviously, during daylight. Then I circled into Frontierland, and I actually sent you the picture because you had jokingly told me, since I was going down, to get a picture of the empty walkways. I will say the crowds were definitely lower than I had seen them in the past, especially considering my last 2 trips were in the summer, and then the one before that was over Easter. So the last few times I were there, they were definitely crowded. I'm not going to tell anybody that there weren't crowds. It was busy. It's Disney World. Don't ever go in expecting it to be empty, because it's not going to happen. But as far as crowd levels compared to what I was used to, it was definitely lower than what I'd come to expect. I had actually decided to ride Big Thunder Mountain. I know that Big Thunder Mountain, that time in the morning, usually has between a 5 and a 10-minute wait. Usually you don't encounter a line until you get to the point where you're walking down to the trains. So I was actually approaching Big Thunder Mountain, and they didn't have a wait time on the board. So I thought that was a little bit unusual. Actually, when I first saw it, I was worried that they were closed. The ride was down for some reason. Fortunately, it wasn't. So I was able to walk through the queue. I got a lot of great pictures in the queue because there's nobody in the queue with me. And then fun. I proceeded to walk through all the queue and then down the ramp and approach the cast member that was standing there. And they had just dispatched a train, and I was the first person. So I got in the last row of the train that they were getting ready to set up. The 3 rows in front of me. And then they dispatched the train, because that's how many people were actually coming at that point in the morning. And it was probably about between 9:20 and 9:30 in the morning. I rode Big Thunder. I actually tried to get a couple of pictures. So after I rode Big Thunder, I decided to do it again. So traditionally, you would expect the line to be about 20 minutes at that point in the morning. Once again, I was able to walk into the queue. I got the pictures I wanted, and one of the pictures I got was of the train. And you could actually see there were about 3 rows at the front of the train filled and about 3 rows at the back of the train that was running filled. So they were experiencing the same type of capacity that they had when I was on it about 10 minutes earlier. Once again, I walked through the rest of the queue, walked down a ramp, was directed this time to 3 rows in front of the back. There was another family that got to the train before I did, and they proceeded to add about 2 more rows of people and dispatch the train, once again, 3/4 empty. So I was able to ride Big Thunder as a walk-on twice, and that was a lot of fun. Earlier in the morning, I hadn't set up any fast passes because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but at one point in the queues for Big Thunder, I was actually able to grab myself a 920 Peter Pan. I then walked up and I rode Peter Pan, and it was about a 25-minute wait according to their time. I will say, however, I did obviously Fast Pass. I walked in with a family who entered the standby line. By the time I rode Peter Pan, that family was getting on. So I'm thinking the line was probably about 10 minutes at that point for Peter Pan. I was able to get a pretty much at that point a Fast Pass for Haunted Mansion. So I went through the Fast Pass queue. They did have the graveyard open, but I think it was more just so people could walk through. I happened to get there right as they were finishing loading up a stretching room. I was about 3 people back from the door. I'm willing to bet that if I would have done standby at that point in the morning, I probably just would have been in the back part of that group that got into that stretching room. So I rode Haunted Mansion. I love Haunted Mansion. It's probably one of my 2 or 3 favorite rides, and I enjoyed doing it. And once again, you saw my path on the GPS tracker. For those of you who don't know, Splash Mountain is going through refurbishment right now, and it appears to be a pretty heavy-duty refurbishment. They have a giant crane set up behind it, and they had scaffolding all around the front. So I didn't even bother getting any pictures of, even though it's one of my favorite things to get pictures of, because I don't see any point in remembering Splash Mountain when it's covered with scaffolding. Then went over to Pirates, and I was able to get a Fast Pass for Pirates pretty much as I was going over. Once again, I walked in a line with a couple that was walking into the standby line, and they actually beat me to the check-in point because I was kind of lollygagging through the Fast Pass side, and they must have been moving, and they were actually on my boat in front of me. So once again, Pirates at this point, about 10:15, was a walk-on. So the crowds were definitely low that day. It is a party night, however. So party days are traditionally a little bit lower in attendance. So if you're going this time of year, if you have park hopper, I would take advantage of going to the park on a day of party day because the crowds are a little lower. Like I said, I was able to walk on pretty much all those attractions I had talked about. The only thing that seemed to have any line at all was Peter Pan, and it wasn't a bad line.
That picture that you sent me of Frontierland, I noticed that it looked like there was like a radio tower in the distance, and I was like, I've never seen that before. But now that you mentioned that there was a crane over Splash Mountain, that makes sense. I can see that it was a crane and not a radio tower because it is got kind of an angle to it. But yeah, I thought I got to ask Mark about that because I don't ever remember seeing a giant radio tower right next to Frontierland. But if it's a crane, that makes more sense.
That definitely killed the theming. I don't know if you've ever noticed. You can really see it if you take a bus into Animal Kingdom or if you're going to the Animal Kingdom Lodge. You look at the tree line, and all the trees are about the same height. And then there's one tree that's about a third taller than the rest of the trees, and it just has branches just at the very, very top. So we were driving, or if we were going to Animal Kingdom Lodge, or if we were on a bus, and my wife asked me why that one tree was so out of place. And I told her, well, it's not a regular tree. It's what they call a Verizon spruce. So Disney's so committed to the theming that they actually make their cellular towers look like trees.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
That's the one place where you can really see one. But yeah, if you're taking a bus to Animal Kingdom or you're going to the Animal Kingdom Lodge, if you look off to the right, you see this one tree that's considerably taller, but it's a cell tower. So I guess it's jokingly referred to as a Verizon spruce. I don't know if anybody remembers from my July trip, but I wanted to try the corn dogs at Sleepy Hollow. Unfortunately, they were out of corn dogs when I went there, which led me to some speculation about which ingredient they could possibly be out of. And seeing as Casey's was still going, I assumed it was probably the sticks because that was the only ingredient that wasn't common to someplace else at the Magic Kingdom. However, they weren't out of corn dogs this trip, so I was able to enjoy my fresh hand-dipped corn dog. I've heard that Disneyland is the gold standard of corn dogs. This was a really good corn dog. I thought it was a touch greasy, but it was really fun that you could tell it was hand battered. And I definitely get it again, but I still am really looking forward to trying the Disneyland corn dog when I go there. It is nice, however, that at Disney World we have a hand-dipped corn dog that we could call our own. Maybe it's the same as the pizza. Like, I've always thought that the pizza at Disney World isn't quite as good because the Florida water is so bad. Maybe the corn dogs just aren't as good because the Florida water is so bad compared to California water.
Maybe.
After that, I just took some more pictures around the hub. I really got into taking the pictures of the small statues around the fountains at the hub. If you get them right, you can get the castle in the background, and it's a great chance throwing back to our discussion about the photography, to play with your aperture a little bit and get the actual statue in focus with the blurred castle, or get the castle as well as the animal sharp. So it's a fun place to play with that technique of photography. So I was able to do that, and by this time in the morning, it actually had turned into a beautiful day. And it was about 11:15. I decided to head out of the Magic Kingdom and head off to Hollywood Studios.
So take us over to Hollywood Studios. What did you do first?
So Hollywood Studios was just more kind of just to get a lay of the land. I wanted to check out the new Walt Disney Presents. This was actually Thursday, the 7th, and it was actually scheduled to open with the Toy Story and Star Wars model on the 9th. So I was hoping they had actually soft opened it. They changed some stuff around in there, but they hadn't soft opened the models yet. So I wasn't able to see those. But I had got myself a fast pass for Midway Mania. And since I was in that part of the park, I figured why not take advantage of that. So I rode Midway Mania and had a great time, and just kind of walked around studios and got some pictures and just enjoyed the ambiance of studios. Got some pictures of the Chinese theater as it's now preparing to become Runaway Railway.
What were the standby wait times over at Midway Mania?
So the standby wait time was actually only 25 minutes. It wasn't bad at all. And one thing I would say is I've always contended that even when Hollywood Studios isn't as crowded, because at this point there's just not that much to do, you're really kind of shoehorned into either Pixar Place, or you're in Hollywood or Sunset. You're in one of just three areas. So it always feels a lot more crowded than I think sometimes it even is. This was one of the few times that I would say that Hollywood Studios didn't feel crowded to me. So that was, I think, indicative of how low the crowd levels actually were. So after I left Midway Mania, I took some time and walked around the park just to get some pictures.
We had some friends that were going down. They left Wednesday morning, and they were supposed to stay through Sunday. But then they found out that they had to get a new flight because their Sunday flight was obviously canceled because of the storm. So they booked a Saturday flight and found out on Thursday night that their Saturday flight was canceled. So they got up at 3 a.m. and drove to Panama City to catch a flight back to Austin, Texas. So, yeah, it is a great time of year to go. Just make sure that you know that weather could play a major factor if there's going to be a hurricane in Florida.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'd keep in the back of my mind. Is a factor, and unfortunately the last 2 years we have had hurricanes that have affected Disney World. But prior to that, it had been 12 years since Charlie. So I don't know if it's just going to be the new normal, that the more that we're going to have the bigger storms and Orlando is going to be more of a target, or if it's just kind of an anomaly that we've had two in quick succession when it had been 12 years and then it had been several years before that Disney was even affected by hurricanes. But it would be something I'd keep in the back of my mind at this time of year. That's something you could possibly run into. So after that, I had a little bit earlier of a flight than I'm used to. Usually we fly out about 7. They've adjusted the schedules a little bit. So I was actually flying out at 4. And it was about 1. And I promised my wife that I'd bring Earl of Sandwich home for dinner. So I headed down to Disney Springs. Parked in the Lime Garage. I always park on level 2 for those of you that aren't familiar with Disney Springs and planning your trip. The Lime Garage actually and the Orange Garage, they both feed into Disney Springs off the second level. So if you're able to get on the second level for parking, it's just an easier experience. If you're not able to, then you just take an elevator to the second level and enter Disney Springs at that point. So I always park at the Lime Garage because it's at the end of Disney Springs where World of Disney is, where Earl of Sandwich, the Polite Pig, the Boathouse. It's at that end. If you go into the Orange Garage, it's down more where Cirque du Soleil is, House of Blues, Planet Hollywood, and the Coke store. So it's depending on where you are looking to go at Disney Springs, which garage would be a better choice for you. Like I said, I always use the Lime because I'm usually going to that end of Disney Springs. So went to Earl of Sandwich, got our dinner, and then as I was heading out, I decided to stop at the Daily Poutine, and I had the French Poutine, which is absolutely wonderful. It's French fries topped with a mushroom cream sauce and Gruyere cheese. It was absolutely incredible. I have in the past had the traditional poutine at the Daily Poutine. So if you're looking for a fun meal that's filling but good, it is a good place to go. The other nice thing is they come in a relatively large bowl, so two people could pretty easily share a poutine and maybe not be full, but have enough that it tied you over, and then maybe you could go to Ghirardelli and split a dessert, or one of the many places that serve great desserts down at Disney Springs. After that, I headed back to the airport, and I don't know if it was because of the hurricane or if it's the fact that I was just running a lot earlier. Like I said, my flights are usually between 7 and 8, and they had changed some scheduling stuff, so I was flying out at 4:07. So I was at the airport at a different time than I'm used to. But I got off the elevators there right by the American desk, and the American line was all the way back by the elevators. So that wasn't what I all expected. In fact, I just said to my wife jokingly when I saw the line, the American line looked more like what the Spirit line always looks like. And the Spirit line actually only had about 10 people in it. But one of my Spirit hacks is, even though it's not easy to, even though you can't necessarily print out a boarding pass at Disney, they do have the self-service kiosks, and you don't have to pay to use those. So I always just run down and print out my boarding pass at the self-service kiosks. The one thing I will say about traveling from Orlando is every time I look at the security lines, they always seem bad, and they were really bad on this day. Like I said, I don't know if it was because people were trying to get flights out before the hurricane, or just at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is just a kind of a peak time to be catching flights. But the regular security line was very long, and it would have taken a good while to go through it. Several months ago, I had the opportunity to get TSA pre-check, and I will say it is the best $85 I have spent, because from the time I dropped off my rental car, I went up, printed out my boarding pass, and went through the pre-check line. It took me 20 minutes to get all that taken care of and be on the other side of security. And there was no way that I would have been able to do that. The one thing I think happens at Orlando is, because a lot of people flying into Orlando are going to the parks, that might only be the second time they've ever flown. And for example, if it was somebody coming from my area, the first airport they took off of was Latrobe, which is an airport that has one security line. It's not near as daunting. So you get to Orlando, and if it's the second airport you've ever been through and you don't know what's going on, there's a lot of hustle and bustle about, and I think that security line just gets backed up because of that type of stuff. It's not as experienced of travelers going through it. Whereas if you pay the $85, do the TSA pre-check, you're with people that are more in tune with how to get through security, and it's a much smoother experience.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah, and if you know you're going to be traveling a lot, I know you've flown down to Florida. What, this was your seventh time in 12 months to fly down there, so it's that's definitely worth it if you know you're going to be doing that in a sustained period of time.
Yeah, it's $85, but it's a 5-year, and like I definitely think it was worth it. In fact, my son's only 11. Once he turns 13, he'll need to get his own pre-check. And they had a registration event at Latrobe, and I actually debated just taking him over to go ahead and get his out of the way now. That way, as he gets closer to 13, we're not clamoring to try to get him pre-check status like it was available. But we're hoping between now and a year from now, when he turns 13, we'll be able to have another event in Latrobe that we'll be able to get him over to. But yeah, it's definitely, if you're planning on traveling much at all over the next 5 years, like I said, it is $85, but I think it's a great investment, especially when you get into the bigger airports, and especially because it saves you the time of not having to take off your shoes, not take off the belt. In Orlando, you don't have to take all the liquids and the laptop out of the bag. So it's just a lot more efficient of a process. Plus, you're going through with people that know the process a lot better because they've made the investment. It's obviously people that are flying. The other thing I've noticed is that the TSA agents are a lot less on edge when they're over there. I don't know if I've told you this story, but when we were coming back in March, there was a TSA agent. This was a big guy. He had a goatee, bald head, and he was yelling at people to get in the line. And he was basically yelling at them to get in the shortest line. All the lines go to the same place. The shortest line is the line that has the least people in it. And he's kind of being a jerk about it. So when we were coming back on our June trip, the same guy was actually the one checking the IDs at the TSA pre-check stand. So I kind of thought to myself, oh, great. We went up, and he was awesome. He had a great conversation with my son. He asked him if he had visited with Mickey or if he went to see Harry Potter. Like, it was a totally different person than the guy I saw over in the other line. But you could just tell he was a lot less on edge. He wasn't as guarded because he was dealing with, one, people who are more proficient with the process, and two, people that have gone through a level of screening. So I've noticed that the TSA agents are a lot more easy to deal with on the pre-check side. So it's definitely something I think about doing.
Yeah, definitely. What an interesting observation, because they can't have an easy job doing what they do, knowing that they've always got to be on watching every single person in line. So, we got to do what we can to take care of our TSA, security agents there at the airport. And one way to do that is to go ahead and get yourself certified so you don't have to worry about going through the line where they're stressed out looking at hundreds of people. They're just looking at, well, it's still hundreds of people, but they're far fewer and they're a lot more professional, and they know the game. Is there anything else you wanted to share about your trip?
Yeah, the only other thing that I really had, and this was kind of a personal note, I really enjoyed my flight back, and for the first time, the plane actually kind of circled my house. So from the plane window, I actually have a picture of my house, and my wife was paying attention on a FlightAware app so she could see where my flight was, and she actually got a picture of the plane as it flew around the house. So it was just kind of a fun way to finish off the trip, seeing my house and then getting a picture of the plane I was on from my home. So just kind of a neat little bookend to that trip.
Wow, how cool is that? So that's something that Spirit offers, is where you can actually track the plane as it's flying in real time. For if you're tracking, a family member or somebody, exactly where they're at as they're approaching the airport. That's great.
Yeah, it's not the Spirit app. It's actually an app called FlightAware, and it tracks every flight that's going in the United States at any given time. So you just have to punch in the flight number, and it'll actually highlight that flight. But it's really neat to look at that app like in the evening, because you can see all the planes, just plane after plane, heading to Europe and following those tracks. It's just kind of a fun app, but it's called FlightAware, and I definitely suggest to anybody that's kind of going to be watching for a plane or is just kind of interested in aviation, it's a fun little app just to play with that kind of information.
Well, what kind of pictures can we look forward to seeing on your Instagram account over the next couple of weeks?
You're going to get a lot of pictures of Asia and Africa and Animal Kingdom, some different perspectives on stuff. The one thing I tried to do differently this time was, for example, I talked about the fact that the castle was open, so you're going to see a lot of pictures from the base of the castle looking up, and just a little bit different of perspectives on things that we're used to seeing. We're just going to look at them a different way. But like I said, definitely anticipate seeing a lot coming out of Animal Kingdom. Got a lot of great pictures out of Animal Kingdom, and once again, it reaffirmed, though it might not be my favorite park as far as attractions go, I definitely think it's the best themed and the most beautiful of the parks. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that over the next few weeks.
Awesome. All right, folks. Well, make sure to check out Mark's Instagram accounts. His first one is King of WDW. His second one, which is my favorite of almost all of the Instagram accounts out there for Walt Disney World, is Grayscale_Disney World. And you're going to see some really incredible stuff. He's got a picture on there from, it looks like Happily Ever After, with just the whole sky lit up and the people in the crowd silhouetted. It's just such an incredible picture. I'm super excited to see what you have coming out from this trip. I know that a lot of ways this was a trip just to go down there and actually get some more pictures and to play with your photography equipment. And it sounds like you got to do that, but you also got to eat some great food, ride some great rides, and got some memories for an opportunity to go back this time of year again in the future with your family and know kind of what to expect from crowd levels. It sounds like a great trip.
Yeah, it was a great trip, and like I said, I'm looking forward to this time next year. My wife is going to be joining me. Like I said, if we would have been able to go next week, she probably would have been able to get the time off to come with me. Just unfortunately with some scheduling stuff, she couldn't this week, and unfortunately the airport shuts down for a week for the paving, so that won't be an issue next year. So looking forward to next year taking a couples trip with my wife this same time period.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing about that then. Well, this has been the Disney Hack. If you have a chance, go check out Mark's Instagram accounts and tell him that we sent you. And go ahead and head over to iTunes while you're at it and subscribe if you haven't to listen to future episodes of the Disney Hack. And of course, you can always find me anywhere you find your favorite social network account. Just look for the Disney Hack. And I think that's going to do it for now, Mark. I really appreciate your trip report. So everybody just stay cool, have a great week. And until we see you next time.
Yeah, until next time, just remember, thank the Phoenicians.